Okay, so welcome to my presentation regarding potholes. I'm going to try and put some thoughts together on what we know and some ulterior thinking. So this is part one, a traditional pothole. Okay, so traditional thinking is you have a road, which is, say for example, asphalt, and you have a base. So the traditional thinking is the asphalt develops a fault. So it gets a crack or a weakness in, which allows water to enter into the crack. So first of all, we've got crack, and then we've got the water. Then we've got the freeze-thaw cycle. So the theory is water gets into the asphalt, it expands and creates and it cracks the surrounding asphalt, so it then breaks up and we then end up with a pothole. So that is really, so that then forms a pothole. But one of the things that does happen is, which we'll come back to the solution, but we've come along and then what we do is we fill in the pothole with a nice piece of asphalt and we seal all the edges, make it nice. But the pothole, more often than not, returns. So take that thought and hold that, and we'll move on to part two. Okay, so part two. Another theory. Not so much to do with the freeze-thawing cycle, but more to do with water. So we've got the asphalt road, we've got our base. So the surface develops a crack, water gets into that crack. So rather than the freezing and the thawing cycle, if the water gets below the surface of the asphalt, and then we have cars that are travelling, there's a nice little car, on top of the asphalt, this causes a hydraulic pumping action. So the road is sitting now, as water gets in here. Also, if you've got a base and you've got tarmac, you've got two different surfaces, water will naturally run between them, the capillary effect. So, but if there's water there, this then is going to become mushy. So it's not hard. So when you then, which is caused by the pumping action of the road, the forces, the downward forces, which is very similar to when you're standing on the sand at a beach, where you go to a beach, you wiggle your feet, water rises, and around your feet it all becomes soft and wet. Then it no longer support you, so you start to sink. Exactly the same principle. So what that then means, this asphalt is no longer supported by the base layer. So then it fails. So again, we come along and we put a new piece of asphalt in there, we seal all the surfaces, but again, more often than not, it fails. Okay, part three. New thinking. Let's think totally outside the box. What happens if the damage isn't being created from above? What happens if it's coming from below? So, for example, around here we've had an enormous amount of water, not many freeze-thaw events. So, what happens during the winter? We've got our road, we've got our base, but what also happens in winter is the water table rises. So, we've got the water table rising, upward pressure. Then we've got vehicles, and vehicles forces, downward forces, causes pumping, which in turn means that water will rise. So, if the water rises and gets underneath the asphalt, so we end up with water pockets here, what happens is the smaller particles of the base drop away. So you end up with voids. Now, if you've got heavy traffic going across voids filled with water, you also end up with forces not only downwards but upwards from the water pressure, because water doesn't compress. So it's causing water to ingress into the asphalt under pressure, which will then weaken the asphalt and eventually cause a pothole. Also, if you have a dry spell, the water table drops off, and these voids are empty. So again, vehicles travelling over the surface, these voids are no longer strong enough, so they collapse. So we end up with a pothole, and we do the same thing. We repair the pothole, we seal it all nicely, but again, it still happens. So a new theory, but still with the same result. Okay, so part 4. Our solution. It's a cone, and it's called PaveVent. Okay, so if we've got our road and the base like we've shown before, and we've got our pothole, then what the contractor would do, using the same methods he uses already, apart from he places our PaveVent cone in the centre of the pothole, with the top slightly below the surface. There will be a cap on the top of our cone, so that when they fill in and compact the asphalt doesn't go inside the cone. When it's compacted, the lid will be removed, so that way the cone will sit below the surface of the asphalt. So the cone. What this cone will do is it will allow water that is below the surface in the base to vent out to the surface. Now, if there's groundwater pressure, you've got hydraulic pressure pushing up. Also, we know that if you've got cars and weight and forces, that creates a pumping action, a hydraulic pumping action, which will also eject water out on upwards. And also is that when a vehicle drives very close to the cone, forces are downwards, and what that will do is that will also increase the force to push the water up. Now, if the forces are not strong enough to eject the water, what also will happen is that the water inside the cone will circulate. Now, that will do two things. Moving water reduces the freezing point, so you've got less chance of the water freezing, and also moving water will evaporate, so you've got more chance of it evaporating away. But also, our tests have proven that if water is inside the cone and below the cone, when a freezing cycle happens, an expansion, and the water freezes and expands, what has happened is the ice has expanded through the cone, and the cone has managed this so that the freezing has not affected or damaged the surrounding asphalt. So the ice has come to the surface. So with all of those different scenarios of how potholes are created, by placing a cone will work with all of those scenarios. You're never going to get rid of potholes. Potholes, because of the way, the pure nature of the way our roads are constructed, potholes will always occur. But what we are doing is we are managing the water that is beneath the road surface. And the new repair, we're giving them the chance to last longer. If we can double the life of a pothole repair, then our contractors can do twice as much work. So, there we go. That's our solution. And in part 4. So, part 5. The final part of this presentation. If this device not only can solve pothole problems, what stops us using the same theory when designing new roads and incorporate hydraulic pressure relief device that will be built into a new road surface or resurfacing of roads, or also when we repair roads or put repaired trenches, we put this device in to allow the water to escape from underneath the road surface. So when we build a new road, for example, as a top view, you've got your centre line there. More often than not, you might have the odd cat's eyes. There's no reason why we couldn't build into the road some sort of hydraulic pressure relief mechanism, for sure. So, food for thought. My name is Steve Bays. Thanks for listening.